Hello and welcome to Meera's Menopause podcast. And today, on this episode, we're going to be talking about, it's a really interesting topic, but it's also possibly fairly controversial. It shouldn't be at all, but it can be. I think it can trigger a few different responses from people. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Pauline Cox, and we met at the festival, at the big retreat festival just a few weeks ago, and I was honoured to be on a panel with you, Pauline, and I was really fascinated by what you were saying, because a lot of what you were saying was a lot of what I have experienced in my own life, but also things that I talk to my clients about as well. So Pauline Cox, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And I would love for you to introduce yourself, because I think that's the best way, rather than me introducing you, and tell us who you are. And I think your journey actually into this space as well has been interesting. So a little bit about that as well, Pauline.
Yeah, well, I'm a functional nutritionist and author, but I didn't start off my career that way. I actually started as a physiotherapist many, many moons ago now. And many of the clients I was seeing at the time were women coming to me with inflammatory conditions, frozen shoulder, bursitis of the hip, migraines, just generally feeling sore, achy, and not so great. And it was really only when I came across the work of Dr. Terry Wall, who was a MD over in America who was suffering with MS, and discovered her book and how she was using nutrition and her diet to radically improve her condition, that I became really interested in the impact of nutrition on our health and well-being, chronic illness, inflammatory levels, and all the things that I'd been seeing in my practice. So I then went off and studied nutrition, and it was like going down a rabbit hole. I thought, wow, like, why do we not get trained? I'd already done 2 degrees at that point, one in anatomical science and a further one in physiotherapy. And not once did we touch on nutrition and physiotherapy. Not once did we look at the inflammatory impact of diet or our gut health. And so it intrigued me. And I went further down the rabbit hole and started studying women's health, and particularly hormonal health. And it just all started to make sense. You know, we look at this very pro-inflammatory period of our life from our sort of late 30s right through to post-menopause, actually, when we start to lose the anti-inflammatory benefit of these sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone. And when we lay that over insulin resistance and already a pro-inflammatory situation that most of us have because of diet and lifestyle, there's no surprise really that so many women suffer from unnecessary symptoms at perimenopause it's just this period that's like a barometer for how we've been living in our 20s, 30s, and into our 40s.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, it's just it's so interesting, because I always say that you lose the buffer, you lose kind of everything that was kind of making everything okay, all those hormones that was just making everything okay, whether you were living on your adrenals or super high cortisol or whatever. It all sort of made everything okay. And then as soon as you get into your perimenopause, and then, as you just said, postmenopause, you don't have that anymore. And your body just does not take any nonsense. It tells you loud and clear. And I think the problem is we're not listening. Well, I think the problem is we don't understand what it's telling us. And I just get a lot of women saying, they're in almost a disbelief. But what is it that I'm doing? What do you mean by this is causing inflammation or increased inflammation? This is just food that's sold in the shops. This is just what everybody else eats. I'm only eating out 2 or 3 times a week at so and so restaurant. And I think that's what's super, super fascinating. But I think again, you hit the nail on the head that we're not educated, even at degree levels. You're just not educated. I've literally just done, it's not even a degree, I've done a course on nutrition, because again, I'm absolutely fascinated by it. And I have had to change completely how I eat and what works for me. And luckily enough for me, I was intuitive enough to be able to do that. And it really helped. But when I was doing this nutrition, this course, I was just going through it, and I was going through the motions, and I was just like, this is just not what I believe. But I'm going to do the course because I need to get some kind of qualification. But it's just not what I know that works. And I think what's really interesting and comes out of all of this is two things for me. Was well, I mean, it's lots of things, but the two main things I think was the understanding and learning about carbohydrates, about sugars, and about fats, right? So I was brought up in a generation of people where we were like, you do not eat fat because fat is going to make you fat. I'm Indian and my diet is predominantly, it might be whole foods, but it's predominantly lentils and rice and chapati and potatoes, really, and porridge and cereals. It's really predominantly carbohydrate based. And I think what's really interesting for me again is there's a couple of things. One is you talk about metabolic health, right? And I'd love to understand what you mean by that. And then just leading that into carbohydrates and fats and your thoughts on those big topics. Sorry, we could be here for ages.
No, it's fine. I think what's really interesting for women to understand is that our sex hormone estrogen is also a metabolic hormone. We think of it as a sex hormone. Yes, it is. It's also a metabolic hormone. What does that mean? It means it helps us to use carbohydrates as fuel. It helps to take the blood sugars and shunt them into the cells for our body to use as fuel. That's in the brain, that's in the muscle, that's all around the body. And so as we lose estrogen, we lose that help taking the blood sugars out of this bloodstream and into the cells. Now, what does that look like in the brain? That looks like brain fog and memory issues and mood issues and irritability and hangriness and body temperature dysregulation. It looks like low mood. It looks like a whole range of symptoms that we associate with perimenopause and beyond. Now, the brain goes through this recalibration as it loses estrogen and goes, okay, I can't rely on that system. I need to recalibrate in order to use fuel more effectively again. Now, the body has two fuel systems. We use glucose for fuel that requires a transporter into the brain cells, and we can use ketones for fuel that doesn't require a transport. They just push themselves into the brain cells, and the brain cells are like, bing, they wake up and they're very, very happy with that source of fuel. Now, in order to use ketones for fuel, we need to be able to burn fat effectively. And this is where the problem lies for many, many people, especially women at perimenopause, because we are more prone to insulin resistance. Now, in a snapshot, insulin resistance essentially means our blood sugars go up after we eat, and insulin is supposed to come along and shunt that blood sugar into your cells to be used, but the cells are just not accepting the glucose from your bloodstream as effectively anymore. So insulin gets pumped out more and more by your hardworking pancreas. And as your insulin levels go up, as it's attempting to get the blood sugar into your cells, insulin starts blocking fat burning, and that excess glucose gets stored as fat. And your poor cells are there going, well, I'm still not getting the fuel I need. So you get this situation where you feel hungry, grumpy, and irritable, tired, lethargic, not getting enough fuel. Your blood sugars are going up, that's getting stored as fat. Your insulin's going up, that's blocking your fat burning. And we can feel really, really miserable. We can gain weight and think, well, I'm not eating any differently as I was 5 years ago or 2 years ago. What's going on? So we really want to be thinking about how we support our metabolic health when we enter perimenopause, ideally before in our 20s and 30s. But when we start thinking about our metabolic health, our body's ability to create fuel, to burn fat, to mop up glucose, these are key, fundamental things that will support you during perimenopause and beyond, because the brain absolutely requires that fuel to prevent your brain from getting these neurodegenerative conditions as we go beyond menopause.
Right. Oh gosh, I mean, literally, I'm blown away. It is, and that's exactly it. Because the women that what I see, clients I see, and a lot of women listening to this podcast as well, will be those ones saying, I eat everything. I'm just not. no different to what I was eating before, yet I'm gaining that weight. I'm a different size. My body feels different. And I think for me, again, very carbohydrate based, really thought I was eating super healthy. And this is another kind of controversial, not controversial one, but another thing. But I was actually, what I was doing was I sort of substituted my sugar and I substituted my chocolate and my all of that sort of stuff. And I thought, do you know what? No, I'm going to be super healthy and I'm going to substitute that for fruit. And what I was doing then was living predominantly on vegetables and fruit, and was having very little of anything else, not much fat, because it was always got to be fat free.
Protein.
And again, yeah,
Yeah.
and then not much, exactly, and then not much, very little protein and all the rest of it. And actually, again, I was still struggling.
Yeah.
Joint pains, I had no energy.
Yeah.
It was just a very kind of, and my perimenopausal years were horrendous. So again, just kind of going into that, because I understand a bit about the carbohydrates, I understand a bit about the fat, our body needs all of that. But what's then going on when I'm thinking I'm being super healthy?
Yeah.
I'm having lots of vegetables, and I'm having lots of predominantly more fruit, not really having too much fat. And again, you've said our body sort of, our brain and thrives on it.
Yeah.
What's sort of going on there? Why am I still feeling rubbish when I'm having lots of fruit and lots of vegetables?
So, fruit and vegetables have many, many health benefits to them. They have fiber, often berries will have things like vitamin C, antioxidants. But what you won't get from your fruit and vegetable is very important essential fatty acids. Now, these become incredibly important. They're important throughout our entire lives. But as we become more prone to inflammation, particularly as you enter your late 30s, early 40s, and beyond, we start to ache more, we become fatigued, our mood can become impacted. And essential fatty acids are, when we think of intelligent fats we get from fish, those omega-3 fatty acids, even omega-6, but we need the balance to be right. So grains typically have a lot of omega-6, and your things like seeds and chia seeds and walnuts and oily fish and linseed, they have high levels of omega-3. Now we need those to be in balance, and sadly the majority of our diet is dominated by omega-6, as you'll find in grains, and processed food is very high in omega-6, vegetable oils, and even rapeseed oil. So when we look at getting the omega-3 levels up, which we have to consciously do really when it comes to this stage in our life, that helps to bring down your inflammatory levels. It balances, it soothes, it eases joint pain. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is when our brain is sat in a soup of this low-grade inflammation, it down-regulates, so it turns down our own production of serotonin, of dopamine, of our calming neurotransmitter GABA. So now we're feeling less motivated. Now we're feeling quite miserable. We're feeling like we've got no motivation, lethargic. What do we do when we feel like that? We go to hit the sugar or the foods that instantly make us feel good and alive, giving us that big dopamine hit. We might have a glass of wine because it makes us feel calm when we're lacking in GABA, which impacts our gut health, which impacts our sleep and our inflammatory levels. So when we really prioritize what our body needs at that time, which is protein, in order to give the amino acids the building blocks for our immune system, our hair, our skin, our nails, our muscle, our bone, our neurotransmitters, brain hormones, when we give it the healthy fats that you find in avocado and oil, olive oil and oily fish. I don't eat a huge amount of oily fish myself, but I absolutely supplement omega-3s every day. I actually use a plant-based one that is really beneficial. There are more options these days for people who are a bit dubious about eating too much fish or pollutants from the ocean and getting fish. So I use an ahi flour based one called Regenerative Omegas, which is actually really nice for our hormones because it also contains something called GLA, which people might recognize from evening primrose oil.
Yeah.
So that particular omega is just really nice for giving you those essential fats, calming the nervous system, supporting your memory, your focus, your mood, inflammatory levels, your cardiovascular health. And actually with regenerative omegas that contain the plant base, it's actually also really good for your gut microbiome too. And your gut, believe it or not, is a really important consideration when it comes to whether something's pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. You can have a pro-inflammatory microbiome or an anti-inflammatory microbiome, and it's one of the biggest sources of inflammation in the body, and that's dictated by what we're eating and
Right.
what's impacting our gut microbiome.
Mm. Okay, so what I'm taking away from this is when we are looking at our diet, our bodies aren't as good at processing and digesting and knowing what to do with carbohydrates. So we need to look at those carefully and have them in moderation. That's kind of what I'm hearing. But we need to really make a conscious effort to make sure that we're getting in the essential fatty acids that we need, because that's really where that's where we're going to be starting to feel much calmer, much more kind of like ourselves again. So, and also, of course, the proteins, as you've added in,
Yes,
as you sort of said,
building blocks.
the building blocks. So it's kind of almost a bit of a, and again, I will use my clients as an example here. A lot of people I speak to and clients I work with will start off their plate of food with the carbohydrate element first, and then they think about they don't think about the fats, and they don't really think about the protein, but it's all sort of carbohydrate based. So it's almost flipping that slightly on its head, really, and thinking, right, well, I've got to think about the protein and the fats and then the carbohydrates.
Yeah.
So let's just stop this kind of ridiculous thing right now. Fats do not make you fat, right?
So not all fats are created equally. I think it's really important to recognize that the body needs a source of fuel, and the body will use whatever fuel is available to it. So if we're giving the body a ton of glucose every day, it's going to use what it can, bearing in mind we become less able to handle carbohydrates as we go through perimenopause. So if we're giving the body loads of pasta and bread and pastries and biscuits and paninis, then it's going to go, whoa, I mean, that's a lot of blood sugar spiking right there. And it'll use what it can, and it'll just store the rest as fat. So the body needs fuel. It will use the fuel available to it. And bearing in mind, again, if you're insulin resistant, that glucose becomes less available to the body. So then we're just like, oh, I'm knackered and I'm hungry, but it's fine. If you're then going, okay, fine, I'm going to bring my blood sugar levels down. I'm going to be more conscious of eating protein and healthy fats and vegetables and berries and yogurt and all these lovely things. Then the body's like, wow, I'm not getting those massive blood sugar spikes anymore. Your insulin sensitivity improves, which basically means your body can mop up that glucose more readily. And the insulin then comes down, which opens up your body's ability to burn fat again. Because remember, consistently high insulin blocks fat burning. Now, there are nuances. So if someone was to say, right, sure, I'm going to really lower my carb intake, and I'm going to just eat lots of cheese and bacon and lots and lots of butter, like really high fat, very, very low carb. Now, sure, their blood sugars are now going to be more balanced, but their body's now got a ton of fat to use for fuel that they're consuming. And if they're not using all that fuel during the day, that fat's still going to get stored as fat. So we want to be looking at what our objectives are. If you're someone who's like, look, I've got a bit of weight that I'm carrying and I'd like to look at improving my body composition, but I still want to be super healthy about doing it, then prioritize your protein. Become conscious of your carbs, your lovely blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. You could still incorporate some sweet potato, beetroot, your veggies in there. You might want to think about eliminating grains to really make it easy to bring your carbs down, but still having all these colorful vegetables and berries and fruits and things on your plate. And then saying, And my healthy fats come from some avocados and olive oil and eggs and goat's cheese and feta. And having those healthy fats incorporated into your diet, particularly your essential fatty acids, as I've already mentioned, that we
Mm.
typically get from oily fish or supplemental forms, but also your linseed and your chia seeds also contain plant-based omegas.
Yeah.
It's important that we think about the balance and not just say, hey, fat's just fine. Fat is fine, but we also want to consider that we don't want to be consuming, maybe 4,000 calories worth of fat a day if we're quite sedentary and we are looking to try and lose a bit of weight. And that's where the nuances come in, Meera.
Yeah, no, I know it's a difficult one to balance out, because it is. I get a lot of people saying to me, yeah, but I eat nuts and seeds and da, da, da. And we're like, okay, well, how many, what quantity are you eating
Yeah.
through the day? It's good for you. It's the same with chia seeds and flax seeds. They have amazing fats in them and good protein and all the rest of it, but it's like they are high in fat. They have got a good amount of fat in them. So if you're having it's sort of a build up, isn't it? And
Yes.
again, it's that balance, and it is without having a consultation with yourself, and without kind of sitting there and actually looking closely at someone's diet and what their goals are. It's very hard to.
It is, but I would say as a rule of thumb for people who are like, oh, look, I just want access to some
Yes.
simple protocols here, I would say create an eating window,
Yeah.
because the longer your eating window, now, again, this is based on someone who hasn't got any complex medical history, you're not diabetic, you don't have any underlying health conditions. This is not medical advice, this is just me saying, as a rule of thumb, if you create an eating window, then you're allowing your body during those non-eating periods. Let's say we stop eating at 7. From 7 p.m. right through to say 8 p.m., you're having a 13 to maybe 14-hour window where your body's not getting fuel from your eating. And so it constantly needs fuel. Like your brain is always hungry. It's demanding fuel all the time. And so the body's not going to be like, oh, fine, I don't have fuel, I'm just shutting off. It'll say, I need fuel. I'm going to use the fuel I have. So we store glycogen in our muscles, which is our instant source of glucose, and in our liver. And once the body's accessed all the glycogen it needs, it'll start turning to your body to burn fat for fuel. And
Right.
this is where creating that eating window, even if you're eating the same thing, but shift your eating window. And this has been shown in many research papers where people who eat the same thing, if they just eat it earlier in the day and create a bigger eating window, they will still lose weight because the body becomes more insulin sensitive and it starts burning fat for fuel overnight during that period of say 7 p.m. to 8 or 9 a.m. the next morning. So an eating window is a very, very simple number one rule. Number two, I would say quit snacking.
Yeah.
You're going to have chocolate. If you're going to have your berries and your Greek yogurt, have it after you've eaten your main meal. Your main meal at lunchtime, and then add your bit of chocolate or your whatever it is that you enjoy as a sweet treat straight after you've eaten your actual savory meal, because the fiber in that savory meal, your salad leaves or your vegetables, will blunt the blood sugar spike, and then if you go for a walk after, that'll really help with your blood sugars even further. So two simple rules there. You're creating an eating window, you're eating your snack food straight after your savory meal, and then you're creating those gaps between meals of non-snacking. And lastly, I would just say, when you look at your plate, make sure you see protein on there as a priority. And then the rest of it is filled with amazing, brightly colored vegetables, salad leaves, cucumber, mushrooms, chopped tomatoes, some olive oil on there, some whole olives, a little bit of avocado mayonnaise or olive oil mayonnaise. And you want a colorful, delicious plate. Look, if your body's not getting enough protein, you will crave food. That is just, if you're craving, you're probably not getting enough protein. And the other thing to bear in mind is, as we enter perimenopause and we are more prone to this insulin resistant state, we get persistent hunger because our brain that regulates hunger is in itself insulin resistant. So it's not getting the fuel to keep it regulated.
Yeah.
So to normalize hunger levels, we really need to make sure that our body's in this optimal state of being able to mop up glucose and burn fat for fuel.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are brilliant tips. Really simple, really easy, and they're not going to cost you anything either. You know, they literally are. It's whatever you're doing. You're just kind of, and it's just making those small changes over a period of time, and seeing how you feel as well afterwards. I mean, I noticed a massive difference when I stopped grain for a very long time, and I know everybody thought I was the oddest person on the planet. You know, what are you doing? You extreme, da, 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 da. And I was just like, no, I don't need it. I'm getting everything I want. You know, I know that potatoes work really well for me. The minute I have rice, I feel miserable.
Yeah.
I've tried to I do at the moment now, I'm postmenopausal, so it's interesting. When I was peri and going through menopause itself, it was horrific. I just couldn't deal with any of it. Postmenopausally now, I can deal with a little bit. So every so often I'll have a little craving for a homemade flapjack or whatever, and I'll make it mostly with ground almonds. I'll put a few oats in it, you know. So we kind of, I do play with it a little bit more now. I'm not so scared of it, whereas before I was, you know, it really didn't work for me. But I just want to just ask you, Pauline, about your book.
Yes.
I love the name, Hungry Woman. Absolutely love the name. I also love the chapter names as well, which are really like, they're so different because they make you want to delve and dive in and read it, really, as almost like a novel. I tend to read, and you've got recipes at the back as well. So I tend to read recipe books like their novels as well. So tell us a little bit about your book and what kind of, where did the name come from? Because again, one of the things I do find, Pauline, and it absolutely, and I didn't know it myself until I started looking into it, is that most women, and I'm talking about women because this is a menopause podcast, I find most women don't eat enough.
Yeah.
And if they are eating enough, it's enough, or calorie wise, they're eating a lot of the stuff that they really isn't working for them. But they're just not eating enough food.
Yeah.
So I was so fascinated by the name.
So Hungry Woman came from a couple of things, actually. Hunger for information, because I think we're starved of information. Women are often unseen and unheard in the medical community, and they turn to this kind of wellness and holistic industry for help and support. And I think it would be remiss of us as trained health professionals in this industry to not be able to say, okay, listen, here's what the science says and here's exactly what we can be doing. So a lot of women I work with and have come across over the years of my work, they are so keen to learn. They want to make change. They're desperate to take control of their own health, but they don't know where to start. And so that kind of hunger I see in them often translates to incredible results, because they're like, wow, that makes so much sense. And yes, I'm on it and I'm doing it. So there's that element. Then there's the the hunger in terms of, we have hungry organs. Our brain is hungry. It needs fueling all the time. And if it's not fueled correctly, if it's underfueled, particularly during this period of perimenopause and shifts in our hormones, even underlying conditions like PCOS and other hormonal conditions that are very linked to our metabolic health, then we can start to find we're getting low mood and thyroid issues and inflammatory issues and all these connected symptoms that we don't associate with our hormonal health, our gut health. I kind of wanted to create this picture to help women have those aha moments. And then hungry, also in the literal sense that we are just hungry all the time because of the types of foods we're eating that give us this massive dopamine spike. They are formulated literally to tap into our brain's chemistry in order for our brain to go, wow, that was good. I need more of that right now. So they're not satiating us in any way. They're hyper palatable and they're making us more and more hungry. And so it's a book to go, okay, ladies, this is for us. This is to help us understand our hormones at any age, from teenage right through to postmenopause. There's a series of sections on different hormonal disruptors, how that translates into our 20s, 30s, 40s and beyond, perimenopause, menopause. And then, as you've already mentioned, the second half of the book is simple, easy recipes. I'm not a trained chef, but over my 25-year career I've learned how to do things simply, easily, and very nutritious
Mm,
foods because I'm a busy lady. I don't want to spend 3 hours marinating and then 12 hours chopping. I want to do something in under 15 minutes and it fuel me and build every cell in
mm.
my body, but also taste really good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it looks, I am going to order mine today, I have to say, because I had a look and I was like, oh, I need this. I need this in my life straight away. And it's an amazing book. Pauline, I think just, what I love to ask all my guests before we finish and we close and I get you to say where people can find you, because that's going to be super, super important as well, is just, I mean, you've shared a lot of practical tips, I have to say, but if there was one thing that you could share with the listeners that you do yourself, something you practice that
Yeah.
you think actually that has really shifted for me, shifted a lot of stuff for me and it's working, what would that one thing be?
I would say before you try and make masses of change the one thing in your life that will make the biggest difference. We all have that one
Mm,
domino that gets the journey started. And the one thing I find with most women is it's sleep.
yeah.
When we get good sleep, we have more energy to make better decisions on what we're eating and thinking clearly about, right, I'm going out for a walk this morning and I'm going to look after myself better today. If you're not getting good sleep, you are going to struggle to make even the
Mm,
most basic, best decision for yourself. You're fueling
mm,
yourself on foods that just get you going. The chances are you're not feeling too great mentally as well as physically. And sleep is an issue for a lot of people. So I would
yeah.
say look at sleep first and foremost. I do cover sleep in my book, but a
Yeah.
good night's sleep starts in the morning.
Yes.
Starts with getting access to daylight to tap into, excuse me, your circadian rhythm. And
Yeah.
as simple as it might sound, it is really key for good sleep.
Yeah.
Daylight in the morning helps you sleep better at night. I would also say use a good magnesium, which again is
Mm,
beneficial at nighttime, particularly for perimenopausal women. As we lose progesterone, our nervous system becomes more on edge, we become
yeah.
more anxious, we lose GABA, which is very soothing and calming at nighttime, and we can start to experience insomnia and anxiety. So omegas and magnesium are two supplements that can be really powerful together at calming the nervous system, getting you into a deep sleep, and kickstarting your journey.
Oh, I love that. It's so good. And again, brilliant practical tips in there as well. Which, yeah, again, I wish I actually had this information when I was going through peri, because that was an absolutely awful time. But I'm glad I'm learning from people like yourself, which is amazing. Continuing to learn, because it isn't a right. I know it now. Absolutely not.
Yeah,
But again, the one thing that I have found is that the minute you start introducing the practical tips that you've mentioned before, that eating window,
yeah,
the making sure you're having the plate which is full,
yeah,
the way you described it, getting those essential fatty acids
yeah.
in, like you've just said it, the women, honestly, it's almost immediate that the sleep is better. It's never 100%, but it's almost
Yeah.
immediately better. And people just don't, they just don't realize that the simplicity of the things that you've said.
Meera, with sleeping, late night eating will disrupt your sleep.
Absolutely,
When
absolutely.
when we eat, naturally our body temperature rises. It's what happens when we
Yeah.
consume food. When we go to bed, our body temperature, our core temperature wants to drop. And so
Mm,
all of a sudden we're creating this tug of war within the body. We're going to bed, our body temperature's gone up when it wants to go down. We're trying to digest all this food, which impacts our blood sugars. And then the kidneys have to work really hard. So 3 a.m., you're awake, you need to go for a pee. It's transformative when you just create that 3 hour window of no eating before bed.
yeah, 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 yeah. Totally, totally. And it is something that, as you said, sometimes the simplicity of things
Yeah.
actually is what completely confuses everyone. You just go, no, it can't be that easy. I'm like, it really, honestly is that simple. But okay, Pauline. I mean, I I could sit and talk to you forever, because there is so much more I want to delve into. But for today, I'm gonna, honestly, I think we've covered so much. My brain is actually just going woo. So, Pauline, I would love more people to know where they can find you. I'd love to know the name of your book and on Instagram, your website, everything. Just share it all, please.
So on Instagram, I'm Pauline J Cox. That's Pauline JCox. The website that I have created is Sow and Arrow, SOWANDARROW. And it's a low carb store that I created, 8 years ago now, to help support people who are looking for really high quality supplements. So I curate all the supplements on there, but also who are looking for bread alternatives and pasta alternatives and things that we can still eat without compromising our blood sugars. And my books, Hungry Woman is the one that is just perfect for women going through hormonal changes. That's available on Amazon or any good bookshop. And then Primal Living in a Modern World was my first book. And that I wrote as a kind of guiding principles for anyone, the men in your lives, your fathers, brothers, uncles, sisters, people who are just a bit confused about nutrition, who want to improve their liver, their adrenal health, their brain health, their blood sugars, and just start to get to grips with what that looks like.
Amazing. Gosh, really amazing. You're doing wonderful work, and long may you continue to do so. I'm definitely going to be visiting the website, because I make my own stuff, but that's going to be a game changer for me, because I've also seen you do activated nuts on there, which I used to spend hours doing in the dehydrator, 24 hours soaking, changing the salt, all the rest of that stuff. Anyway, I am so glad you're doing that. And Pauline, it was such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And to all our listeners, if you've enjoyed today's episode, please save it, share it, like it. And the more of you that are listening, the more we can share this knowledge and just become more educated about our health. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Meera.